Good morning. This is podcast number 11 with Tyler the Superhuman and myself, Dustin. Today we're going to take a little bit of a left turn here. We're going to go over a book that
Tyler and I have had for a number of years.
In fact, we kind of encourage the book at school, at the martial arts school here. It's called the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, and it's by Bruce Lee. This book it's not a instruction manual. I think it's more of a guide, a glossary of terms.
To me, it almost seems like it's a glossary of terms in the fact that it's, here's, Bruce Lee at the height of his skill, the height of his martial arts, when he wrote this, and just these kind of like these nuggets of information that he found, that he found to be true for him.
Yeah.
And he put down just in like easy to read sections. It's not like a novel written.
No, there's not really a beginning. There's not an overarching story or anything like that. This morning, while we were getting ready for this, I was reading the introductions, and there's a number of introductions from different people, and one of them, his wife, was talking about when he started working on this, which was really cool. He had some back injury, and he was out for like 6 months. Mm-hmm. And to keep himself busy and keep himself working, he started putting this book together. In it, she talks about like staying busy and keeping his mind working, and how he didn't intend it to be a how-to book or learn Kung Fu in 10 easy lessons book. He intended it to be recorded as the way he was thinking about martial arts.
Right.
And like in it, he was writing not to a specific student, but to an imaginary student, like another version of himself, like kind of talking to himself. So there's like some contradictory things, and there's some things that like one could find, I think, if you had a good length of time where you couldn't do anything physically, you just had to think about it.
Like reflective.
Yeah. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff in there, and it's really good. Anyway, Tyler and I went through the book and kind of highlighted a couple of things that we wanted to read to each other and talk about what they mean and maybe mean to us. And so I hope you will listen along and come up with some of your own thoughts and, enjoy. Do you want to go first?
Yes.
Okay.
So in the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, so in one part of the book right here, it's towards the beginning, it's in the section called the Formless Form, which is interesting because, our art, Wu Yin Dao, is no form way, or the formless way, formless path, the invisible way. So he says right here, so this section on page 26 is the formless form. And he says this: I hope martial artists are more interested in the root of martial arts and not the different decorative branches, flowers, or leaves. It is futile to argue as to which single leaf, which design of branches, or which attractive flower you like. When you understand the root, you understand all its blossoming. I like that last part. When you understand the root, you understand all its blossoming. So, to take it to an extreme, example, it's like, like I said before, a cherry tree will never give birth to pomegranates. When you understand the root of something, like when you truly understand the root of something, when you plant a clove of garlic in the ground, that root will not give birth, to a cucumber.
No.
So
no matter how much you want that to be.
Yeah, so that's an extreme example. But in this regard, he's talking about understanding the roots, where like we have these different forms. He says, I hope martial artists are more interested in the root of martial arts and not the different decorative branches, flowers, or leaves. So we've got all these different styles of martial arts, like what we study Wu Ying Dao, and you've got what Bruce Lee did, Jeet Kune Do. He studied Wing Chun. You've got boxing, you've got Krav Maga, Kenpo, Shotokan.
All of these different variations. And ultimately, they're all trying to do the same thing.
Exactly.
Which is kind of cool in itself. It's like nobody has more than two arms and two legs. You can have less, but you can't get more.
You can't get more.
At least not yet. And it's like they've all tried to do the same thing. How do I punch or kick somebody? Well, how many ways can you move your arms? How many ways can you move your legs? Some may emphasize one or the other, but we're all going for the same thing, right? We're all trying to hit somebody. We just do it a little differently.
We do, yeah.
And at the root, the goal is the same. We're trying to hit. How we try and hit is where those different branches come off.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, and it's something that I've been thinking of. Like that goes with what you were just saying. Is the goal is to hit. There's only so many ways you can hit your opponent. Mm-hmm. It's not like last week a martial artist came up with this revolutionary new way of hitting somebody. Like there's a finite way that one person can hit another person, and there's only so many
ways that's going to happen.
You're eventually going to be limited. There's not just this new recent profound discovery. A secret punch. How to punch someone. Or kick. Like there may be harder strikes and harder punches, harder kicks that other, like you said, other arts may emphasize that are harder to do, but they're still only. We're all after the same thing.
Before the internet, I used to read comic books and stuff when I was a kid.
I remember those.
And magazines and whatnot. And there was always these ads, and I don't know, in the back, it was like, learn how to become, ultimate fighter guy, throw punches and secret knockout techniques or lose weight with this special diet pill or stuff like that. And it's like,
Buy the 4 VHS box set.
Yes. Yeah.
And you'll get the bonus 5th VHS.
Yeah, for 3 easy installments of $29.95.
Anyways, what keep going?
Yeah, so when you're an impressionable kid and you don't have the access to the internet because it hadn't been there, you couldn't go look these people up. You just had to take the word off the advertisement, And so I think that brings a little bit that validity to that statement. We're all, at the root, we're all doing the same thing. It's just how we get there, or how we branch out. Okay, carrying on back to the book, as Jocko says, the point is. This is in the section called On Zen. The point is doing of them. The point is the doing of them rather than the accomplishments. There is no actor but the action. There is no experiencer but the experience. I had to read that a couple of times when I first saw it. I'm like, what are we getting at there? There is no actor but the action. There's no experiencer but the experience. And I flash back to when we have a concept that we learn called experiencing or expecting. I'm a great expector. I'm not very good at experiencing. And so I struggled with that really hard. There was a point training where this new guy came into the dojo. This was one school ago, before we moved to this building we're at currently. And I was in this rut where I had like 3 or 4 combinations that I used. And I used them because they worked. Not all the time, but they worked the most often, right? And this guy hadn't been training at the school very long, and he's not training any longer here. I don't know where he's at now. I don't even know his name. But he was fairly accomplished. He had studied a couple of different styles. And I went right into my rut of using one of these combinations. It was like, I don't remember exactly, but it wasn't even very good. It wasn't a very good one. Anyway, it didn't work. he countered everything I did and thumped me. You know, we have this engagement. We're sparring. We have this engagement. I do my thing. It doesn't work. He counters me, hits me in the head, and we break. And we go right back into it. And I do the exact same combination.
Huh.
And I kid you not, I did that like 3 or 4 times in a row. The exact combination. And I was like in this rut. And I panic. And I'm like, and at this time, I'm like maybe purple belt. So I'm about almost halfway, not quite halfway through yet.
At the experience, expecting.
Yeah, in terms of rank or whatever, my experience. And I had just, I couldn't do anything else. And I was just stuck in that expecting like this. I was trying to, cram the square peg in the round hole. And it just, and like the more it didn't work, the more I tried. And instead of stepping back and like taking a deep breath and experiencing the moment and being like, okay, do this differently. I just,
trying to do it.
Just ramming my head into the wall. So in thinking about this term in particular, like I think removing oneself, disengaging or stepping back and taking a breath and not focusing on the problem so much with like a laser pointer, but taking a more broader approach, stepping back and looking for different avenues. That, I don't know. That was profound to me. Like, okay, if you only focus on the tree, you can't see the whole forest kind of thing. Right? Like when you look through binoculars, you can focus on one thing really well, or a microscope. You can focus down to the cell level, but you don't know exactly the big picture. Right? And sometimes you need to be able to focus on the cell level when it's appropriate. And other times you need to be able to take that broader view and see the whole picture. Mm-hmm. Right? So I think that kind of touches on that's what he's pointing at.
Read that quote one more time.
So the point of doing them the point is the doing of them rather than the accomplishments. There is no actor but the action. There is no experiencer but the experience.
Huh.
I don't know. Okay, maybe I'm way off base, but that's what that said to me.
No. That sounds good. That's good. Yeah, tunnel vision. You don't want to get tunnel vision. Like, I mean, maybe at certain points your vision needs to go wide. You need to see the forest. Yeah. And at other points, you need to look at that tree. Like,
yeah. Well, I think that there's
not locked on one or the other. It's very fluid.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a salesman that he's on YouTube, and he's always talking about you need to be fluid in that you focus on the micro, but you also have to have the ability to step back and take it from a macro point of view as well. And you need to be able to switch because there are things that are going to need that micro, and there are other things that are going to need the macro. And if you focus on one of those points too long, you lose the other one.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought that's kind of cool. So experiencing versus being the experiencer, right? If you like the guy who's done everything, who's always got a story for stuff, very cool. But are we so focused on the story that we aren't taking in the new things?
Yeah.
That kind of thing?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Maybe.
No, that does.
I hope. All right, your turn.
Okay, so here on page, this is on the qualities chapter under the coordination section on page 45, and this is just a chunk of one of a bigger paragraph, but it says, above all, he's talking about a fighter here, the fighter. Above all, the fighter makes his movements with a purpose rather than with a doubting hope, because he has confidence in himself. Above all, the fighter makes his movements with a purpose rather than with a doubting hope, because he has confidence in himself. That goes in anything in life, like, anything we do, like it's obviously natural if you don't have confidence in certain things when you first start out. I had a really good professor in film school who he said, in one of his books, he said that confidence comes from technical skill. So confidence comes from technical skill. So it's hard to move with confidence in something that you don't already know.
Yeah.
But once you have done something, like say martial arts or painting or, carpentry, once you know it and you're comfortable with it, you can begin to make your movements with a purpose because you have confidence in yourself, rather than with a doubting hope. And I found myself definitely in sparring, I go in, I might quick close or move in real close to, real quick to my opponents. And I'm like, I hopefully I'll hit them, or I'll hit her or, whoever I'm sparring against. And that's the doubting hope. Maybe I can land a hope.
Just throwing stuff out there and hoping you hit.
Yeah. Maybe I can land a hit is what I meant to say. Yeah. And then versus no, I'm going to go in and I'm going to hit.
Yeah.
Those are the two different attitudes.
Yeah. I'm going to tell a story again, but the first time, this was pre-COVID, Sensei Blue's school came out from Wisconsin.
Right.
They some of them, Sensei Blue, I think, flew, but some of his students drove out here.
Drove the bus.
Yeah, drove the school bus. And I'm sparring with somebody who was from Wisconsin, higher ranking than me. I want to say it was Sensei Betsy, but I'm not 100% sure. And they were a black belt. And I don't remember where I was at. Still fairly new to everything. And we're sparring, and I'm just kind of, like you said, just spraying and praying. hoping that one of my punches or kicks are going to land. And she stopped me, and I'll never forget. She stops me, and she goes, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Sparring?" She's like, No. When you throw a punch or a kick, what are you trying to do? She's like, "Well," he goes, and I said, I'm trying to hit you. And she goes, "Pick a target, hit the target. Don't just throw stuff out. You're wasting time, wasting energy. You're not going to get anywhere unless you pick a goal and try and beat it." And that was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And then the minute I started to do that, it was a whole paradigm shift. It got better. Now I didn't mean I won that match or anything like that, but everything became more accurate, right? And I think you could do that with just about anything. If you have a goal to paint or build a house or buy a car or whatever, when you have something to focus on, your shots have, the attempts get closer to it.
Right. Yeah. When you have the target to shoot
as opposed to just throwing stuff out there and hoping something sticks, you've got to have a focus. You've got to have something to work towards. And I think that points to it. And
having a target to hit gives you the focus, and that also gives you, I think in a lot of ways, obviously gives you confidence, because you're like, I missed this, but here's where I need to adjust. Yeah, here's where I need to adjust. And by thinking that and you making that connection, he's covering his face pretty good, but I see he's not covering his ribs real good. And then your confidence goes up a little bit from that
initial
realization.
Yeah.
And so, then, the fighter, he makes his movements with a purpose rather than with a doubting hope because he has confidence in himself. Yeah, that's kind of been a big one that I've been trying to work on. Moving with confidence into an engagement.
Yeah. To keep going on that just for 1 second, we were talking about before we started sparring with somebody who's not as experienced as you, sparring with somebody better than you, and then finding somebody that's at your skill level. And when I spar with younger or less experienced people, I try to make sure every shot hits and that they don't hit me. Right. That's the goal, right? And then when you have somebody better than you, obviously that goal is much harder, but I try and learn something. I don't know. That's just something.
No, that's good.
That I was just thinking.
That's good.
Okay. The perfect way is only difficult for those who pick and choose. Do not like, do not dislike. All will then be clear. Make a hair-breadth difference, and heaven and earth are set apart. If you want the truth to stand clear before you, never be for or against. The struggle between for and against is the mind's worst disease. That, I don't know, that just kind of stood out to me. The whole pick and choose and the dislike and like and all of that. I think that's deeper than what it is here, just in the written portion of that. You can take that to politics, to life, to personal beliefs, or whatever. But it kind of stood out to me because picking and choosing, I've never really understood that on a deep level. Like, I've always taken things as it comes, the opportunity. Like, for the instance, when we started doing this, we were just talking. In my mind, I was just talking. I'd like to start a podcast. I had no clear definition of how that would work out or how I would do that. I just literally vomiting words. And you were like, well, let's do that. Let's start Monday. And then I was like, well, I just jumped into the deep end there. I had no defined goal for that. I was literally just like, hey, I'd like to take up ballet or whatever the case may be. I would like to start a podcast. I think it would be interesting to do and talk about things. And I do that with a lot of stuff. I'm I guess a dreamer in some sense. And I kind of have always picked and choosed and floated from one thing to the next and like, oh, I'll do this, I'll do that, and dabbled. I dabble, yeah.
Dabble.
And so that's why that rang out to me. That's why I was like, ooh, I should read that. I don't think that I'll ever fully understand that comment, that whole thing, because I'm too into the picking and choosing portion of that. But maybe somebody will get a little something out of it. Send me an email and explain it to me.
We'll read it one more time.
Okay. The perfect way is only difficult for those who pick and choose. Do not like, do not dislike, all will be then clear. Make a hairbreadth difference, and heaven and earth are set apart. If you want the truth to stand clear before you, never be for or against. The struggle between for and against is the mind's worst disease.
Right, so that's almost like in regards to like a goal or a target, right? It's kind of like how I'm hearing about it. Like, in order to get to your goal or hit your target, whatever that may be, whether a career goal, or a life goal, or a simple getting around your opponent's defenses and hitting your target, it's more, it just sounds like it's about hitting that target or achieving that goal and not worrying about the obstacles or things that may come up, right? Is that kind of...
Well, yeah, but
I mean, it's a very deep...
Yeah, also, like, don't pick and choose, don't be limited to one thing. Oh, I only stand up and box.
Right.
Well, then you've limited your choices. Or I only grapple. Well, what happens if you can't grapple? What happens if you can't get this person to the ground? They're not allowing that. They're sprawling. They're throwing a knee when you try to do a leg, single leg or something. When you pick and choose, if you've picked one option, you've eliminated all your other options. That's kind of how I'm taking that.
Okay. I mean, obviously, at some point you've got to pick. Am I going to throw a front punch or like, an uppercut?
You have to, but don't be only looking for that opportunity to throw the uppercut, because then you might miss the leg sweep or you might miss the round, the hook.
Yes. Okay.
If you're only looking for the one thing, again, don't focus on the micro too much because you'll miss the macro. If you focus on the macro too much, you'll miss the micro.
And that circles back around to what you were saying about when you were sparring that one scene, where you were trying...
Square peg, round hole. It just doesn't work sometimes.
You were trying to look for that opportunity for those two moves you had, that combination.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't working.
And then when it didn't work, instead of going to something else, I just kept trying. I don't do that anymore. Well, knock on wood. Not always. Sometimes I still do.
All right. The next, are we
yeah, go for it.
Okay. This is one of my favorites. This has stood out to me since I read this in this book. It's on page 68 under the attitude subsection. And it says, a practitioner must learn to perform at top speed all the time, not to coast with the idea that he can open up when the time comes. The real competitor is the one who gives all he has all the time. The result is that he works close to his capacity at all times, and in doing so, forms an attitude of giving all he has. In order to create such an attitude, the practitioner must be driven longer, harder, and faster than normally would be required.
That's gold.
Yeah, that's gold. I mean, that's essentially saying like obviously there's a time to learn to practice and spar at 50% speed, right? There's a time to do that. There's a time to learn control. You have to learn control, and not blasting your training partner with
all the time,
all the time, 100% strength and speed. So you've got to vary it, but and I don't think that's what he's saying here.
Yeah.
I mean, he does say a practitioner must learn to perform at top speed all the time. So you've got to, if you train 4 days a week in martial arts and you're training those days at 70%, 80% of your speed and your strength all the time, then you go to a tournament and you're expected to then perform at 100, trying to open up, as he says, to go to 100% of the time, or 100% of your speed and strength. It just ain't going to work. I mean, if you're practicing to run an Olympic marathon, or Olympic sprints or whatever, you are giving 100% of your effort.
Yes, and I think it applies to effort. Like you should, with any task, you should give all your effort. Mm-hmm. And if you're only half-assing it, so to say, that's what you're going to get. Those are the results you're going to get. If you're putting your effort in, like we were talking before we started, we were talking about students, and some students struggle with enthusiasm, or they struggle with being overwhelmed. Full class, 25 students or whatever, they can get a little overwhelming. And I was telling this person, just focus on getting better at one thing. When it's all overwhelming and like you're learning something that's above what you're at, just try and get better at one thing, because that in turn bleeds down. Mm-hmm. Like it will, you work at getting a little bit better at a skill that you don't quite have, and I think that it will bring everything up.
That goes back to what you were talking about the salesman. You got to see the macro picture, mm-hmm. and you got to then focus on the micro picture, and that's for that time focusing on the micro. That says I'm going to get this one thing really good.
Yeah, I'm going to improve this. And I've also heard it put like there's a gentleman who was talking about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and it took him like 10 years to get his black belt. He was like, I've never focused on getting my black belt, like as this holy grail thing. He goes, I just focused on getting better. Every time I went to a class, every time I went to go train, I just focused on getting better. And he goes, then the belts come. That's like almost like a afterthought, or not an achievement, but just like this thing that happens on the side. Usually, I didn't care about that. I just wanted to get better. Every time I came in, I just focused on making myself a little bit better. And I've heard that applied to a bunch of different things. Like if you're trying to lose weight or you're trying to stretch, you want to be able to do the splits, and you can't do the splits. You can't even get 10% of the way. Don't focus on doing the splits because that's a far off goal. Well, that's like a world away. Just focus on opening that out just a little bit more. Go from 10% to 11.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually you'll get there. But focus on what you can do now. I don't know. Maybe just focus on what you can do now and improve that a little bit. Because progress is progress, regardless of where you're at.
Yeah. Okay.
This one's kind of funny. Don't run away, let go. Do not seek, for it will come when least expected. So, did you ever play with Legos when you were a kid?
Oh, yeah.
Like a big
I still play with Legos.
I do too. I have kids that play Legos, so I have to build stuff with them. I had a friend, we were always playing Legos, and we would just dump everything on the floor, right? And then you build stuff. And some of those Legos are tiny, and you spend 20 minutes looking for one little tiny piece, right? And it's buried in the carpet somewhere. To the point where you get frustrated and you're like, oh, I'll just look for something else, right? And you go looking for something else and then you find the original piece.
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. So, micro and macro. If you spend all your time looking for this one little piece and it has to be the right color and the right size, you can't find it. Sometimes you need to go look for something else and that'll come up. I don't know. That's all I thought about when I read that line last night. I was like, Legos. It's Legos.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. Read it one more time.
Do not run away, let go. Do not seek, for it will come when least expected.
Yeah, there's been a bunch of times that I've had days where I'm like, you have a hard day at work or a hard day doing whatever. Mm-hmm. And then I'm like, man, I just don't want to go to karate. Like it's just one more thing on top of this rough day. And those days, where
it's almost like that's the time you need it.
You have to go.
Yeah.
Because those days, just like Sensei Blue says, your biggest enemy to success is that front door,
mm-hmm.
Or your black belt is walking through that front door. And I'm like, well, I'm just going to walk through that front door. And then every single time I've done it, there hasn't been one time where I didn't have some sort of breakthrough or something.
Learn something new.
Learn something profound and new. Every time I've had that, I've always came away with something new. So I don't know if it was because that nugget of information or that skill I was meant to find that or learn that time, or that maybe because I'd had such a hard day and yet I forced myself to walk through that front door, that it came to me, if it was some sort of combination of those two things, like I was just meant to, but that's like, don't run, essentially I would have been running if I wouldn't have showed up to class.
You'd been running from it.
I'd been running from it, and I was like, nope, I'm just going to walk through that front door. And man, you have a great time. You learn something,
Yeah.
And so I can't, that's just totally is something you've got to do.
I'm inherently lazy. Like, I don't want to do anything. And I have a kettlebell at work, just a 25-pound kettlebell that I brought to work, and I just leave it there. And I look at it every single day. And every day I look at it and I'm like, I don't want to swing that thing around. and it's literally, some days it's like a 20-minute conversation about like why I don't want to do it with myself. And I don't do it every day, but I always feel better when I do. And it's almost the same thing with like martial arts. Every day I'm like, I look at my day. Some days I have like a 14-hour day between work and martial arts and driving, all, everything. It's like, and I'll get to work in the morning and I'm like, I'm not going to martial arts today. I just can't. It's too long. I want to go home. I want to sit down. I want to watch a movie. There's all of these excuses in my head. They're constantly going. And it's a battle between the lazy and the, no, you're going to do it because it's good for you, and yeah, some days the lazy wins, and I don't feel better for it. And
you give in.
I give in, and other days it's the working side wins, and it's good. It's good. It's important. If I wasn't expected, if I didn't have things that were expected of me, I don't know that I would go half as often. I don't know. I'm glad that I'm here. Don't get me wrong. I want to be here because I know what that feels like when I don't.
Mm-hmm. It's like those days that
I have to set expectations. Like, for instance, we have an agreement. We're going to meet here at a certain time. If we left that fluid, I'd be like, I'll see you next week. Right?
Yeah.
But we make a plan, and it's like, I have a plan now. I have to be here because I'm expected to be here. I have a commitment that I've made. So that makes it easier for me. Like when I have a commitment, if I put a reminder in my phone, hey, you're stretching, you're swinging the kettlebell, you're gonna, you're not gonna buy any Girl Scout cookies or whatever, I'll stick to it. But if I'm just left to my own devices or my own thoughts, I'll be like, I'll do it next week.
Yeah, that's what happens. Yeah, expectations. Let's see. So this my next section is on page 98, and it's under the section of the hook. So like a hook punch.
Okay.
The hook is more effective as a counter blow. It is never a wide looping blow, but is more like a loose, easy, snappy punch. Remember, the pivot is the key. Footwork makes the punch. So that's the part that sticks out to me. Footwork makes the punch. And so that's so important because the footwork does make it goes so much deeper in that footwork makes the punch. Like an extreme example is that and I think about this all the time, like you have to get within the critical distance line to hit your opponent, or at least within your critical distance line, right? Mm-hmm. So there's 3 critical distance lines, yours, theirs, and the one between you, right? Like you've got, because say you're sparring somebody that's 7 feet tall mm-hmm. versus somebody that's 5'5". Well, obviously the critical distance line, the one between you two is much wider because the 7 foot tall person
has much longer reach.
So the 5'5" person has to stay way
out of that range.
Out of range. But to get within that 5'5" to get to where the 5'5" person can hit the 7 foot person, they have to get well within the 7 foot person's critical distance line. So I kind of describe it like that. You each have your own, maybe it's not 3 critical distance lines. Maybe I'm saying it needs to be 2. You have my critical distance line, the opponent's critical distance line. Mm-hmm. But in order to land an effective blow, you have to get within striking distance of them. Yeah. And so that's where footwork becomes important because you have to move yourself closer to your opponent. I can't stand 10 feet away from them and throw those punches out like that one opponent, or when you were sparring with Sensei Rollins. Yeah. And she was way out of range, and you were just throwing these punches out into the air that were a foot away from, I don't know what you said, a foot away from her head.
It was never gonna connect.
They were never gonna connect because you were way out. You were just like threatening your opponent, but it was wasting energy,
wasting time.
Yeah. So like footwork, as this quote says, footwork makes the punch, and it is about like the pivoting, and are you pivoting on your feet and pivoting on at your waist to get a bunch of the strength into that strike. Mm-hmm. It's also footwork makes it. You have to use footwork to get closer to your target. Like a lot of times, so I guess in life, we have these goals we want to go after, and we want these goals in life, but we almost expect that the goal picks itself up and waddles itself closer to you. Like
it's not that way.
It's not that way. The goal doesn't have legs of its own to come to you.
Mm-hmm.
You have to use your footwork and get closer into your goal.
Well, and not only that, but like a punch isn't just thrown with your arm.
It's not thrown with your arm.
I mean, you can, but it's not going to be as effective if you don't put your body behind it.
Yeah, it's so much more to it.
Into it. I've heard, and I don't know who this is attributed to, but I think it's a boxing coach, and he says the punch starts with your toes.
Huh.
And like how you step into that punch, how you shift your body, you put all of your body behind the punch. Yeah, I can't remember who said that. I want to say it's a boxing coach. I heard it somewhere, but
the punch starts with your toes.
Yeah,
interesting.
And yeah, you have to put effort behind it. You have to put your weight behind it. You have to shift your body.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you can still punch with just your arm, but it's not going to be as effective.
Not nearly as.
That is one of the things I think that most people, especially beginner students, struggle with, is learning that technique, learning how to shift and turn your body into that and step forward and engage that and get more power.
There's a lot going on when you're trying to move your feet and get closer to your opponent, but also rotate your hips. There's a lot going on there.
Mm-hmm.
But so kind of the you've got a pivot, and that also goes into like one of the other quotes we read, which was confidence, moving into
with effort.
Mm-hmm. And if you're not doing correct technique of rotating your hips and throwing it at a good target, well, it's not going to be as effective as it could. You've got all that stuff stacked on top of each other.
Yeah.
All right, what do you got?
The great mistake is to anticipate the outcome of the engagement. You ought not to be thinking of whether it ends in victory or defeat. Let nature take its course, and your tools will strike at the right moment.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's really
good.
I've really started to apply that in my sparring the last couple months. And I noticed because I've really started dissecting my sparring the last couple months while I'm working or during the day or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, man, maybe from an objective point of view, somebody else's subjective point of view, my sparring has or hasn't changed. But me, I've never been more pleased with my sparring because I'm going in literally in the moment in my sparring, not worrying whether I win or lose, but just being ready to adapt to my opponent and see the openings and let those openings suck in my fist or my foot like a magnet.
That's a cool way of thinking about that.
Sensei Court talks about that. He's talked about that multiple times. Is if you see a target on your opponent, imagine it's a magnet for your fist or your foot. That's just wham, and it's almost like you can't even stop it.
It just happens.
It just happens.
Yeah,
and that's not being worried about the outcome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Part of it.
The couple months back we videotaped sparring.
Yes,
that was an awesome tool.
Awesome
tool, and to be able to look at that and then watch yourself, watch your opponent, and see the things you did right, but also the things you did wrong. That was really eye-opening. We should do more of that. That was really, really good.
Really good. I mean, I've watched a couple of those, and I noticed how me and my opponents are, because we're all getting so good as we all advance and rank, that just how good it's getting, how fluid, how we're just, I know me personally, like that quote says, I'm not worried about the outcome. You just let it, what's it say? Let nature take its course.
Yeah, basically, the tools will strike at the right moment. Let nature take its course and your tools will strike at the right moment.
Yeah, because I notice I'm not trying to force a front punch down somebody's throat when they've got their, their arms in front of their face. I'm not trying to force my front punch through their guard where I'm punching their hand. That is a strategy.
Yeah, well, you know who Boss Rutten is?
No.
He was an MMA guy. He's Dutch, I think. Anyway, I was watching a couple of his instructional videos on YouTube, and he was talking about when you throw a punch and the person, their guard's up and they block it, and you catch it like maybe at the last moment. You throw the punch and their hands come up to protect themselves. He's like, you shouldn't try and stop that punch as it's going. Just hit them. Hit them as hard as you can every time. He's he was a competitive fighter, but he was like, it's still going to hurt. Even if they block that, they cover up their head and they block, it's still going to hurt them. And it might not be your intended target, but that's still going to cause pain.
Huh.
And I was like, oh, why would you do that? But he's talking, I think he was more talking about in one instant, like a snapshot, not as an overall strategy. Not as an overall strategy, but like if your punch is coming and they see, they read that punch coming and they cover up, you shouldn't abandon that. It's already been gone. It's already left its base. It's coming for the target. Just because it's not going to hit the target doesn't mean you should stop that. Put effort into stopping it. You've already let go.
I like that.
Yeah.
I've always thought about that, like in sparring. And I just personally, I've thought about, why I see it all the time. Students will throw these halfway punches and you'll go up to block it and they'll stop and then pull back. It's like, well, you just literally wasted energy and effort. Why wouldn't you just have thrown it and maybe it does something? Maybe,
you don't know until it's actually landed that it's going to hit. And that was I think that was the other thing he was talking about too. You don't know the outcome until after it's happened. So why try and second guess it? Like, why stop it?
Okay, that's a good one.
I don't know. I mean, none of this is concrete, like truth, right? This is all abstract thought.
Yeah, it's the craziest thing is it is abstract thought, and at the beginning of this book, there's a quote, the dedication at the beginning of the Tao of Jeet Kune Do. Dedication. This book is dedicated to the free, creative martial artist. Research your own experience, absorb what is useful, reject what is useless, and add what is essentially your own. I'm at a point now as a martial artist where I have made some decisions on maybe techniques or other maybe other arts or maybe other things to where I have found out truths for myself. Like it's not something somebody else told me as far as, this is concrete, this is the truth. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of times it's just opinions and you have to take in what is truth for yourself and then disregard what is not truth for me. And, what a truth that I have found may to be false. Now, this is where it gets, a little complicated. It's, a truth that I have found out to be true versus, a truth, a supposed truth that I have found that has turned out in my experience to be false may be a truth that has turned out to be true for somebody else.
What works for you may not work for someone else, and vice versa.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I see what you're saying.
Exactly. So I said that in a mouthful, but yeah. So that's there's just some certain things that I have found out in my in real life encounters and in martial arts that I'm just like, well, you know what? That is a teaching I have heard that I can honestly say I don't agree with. I can't force myself to believe certain things but those things may be true in the martial arts for other martial artists, but not for me. And it's really a beautiful spot to have gotten to where I can
like this works for me, but this doesn't work. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was, but
That's
I wanted
cool.
to read that quote because that quote piggybacked off of what your quote just said, which was or what you said about being, what did you say about
The punching?
No, but this is all subjective.
Yeah. This is all abstract thought.
Thought.
None of this is concrete fact. Don't believe my hype.
All right, what do you got? There's so many good nuggets
There's
of information.
tons, and every time I open this book and read something, I'm like, oh, that's a good one. Here's one. Maturity does not mean to become a captive of conceptualization. It is the realization of what lies in our own innermost selves.
Huh. That's pretty profound.
Yeah. Yeah. There's tons. This book is great. You can find it on Amazon, bookstores all over the place. It's a treasure trove, and literally every time I open it up, I find a new thing. I have one last one that I want to do. Go ahead. We're what, pushing an hour? Oh, we're just almost at an hour right now.
Yeah,
we're doing good.
I've gone through every single one that I want to.
Okay.
That I can think of.
Well, I got one that I read it and I immediately thought of you.
Okay.
Because Tyler and I came up, we were like neck and neck the whole time in training. It's funny. I'd take a week off for vacation or work relation, work stuff, and Tyler would. I'd come back to class and Tyler would have a new belt. And he'd be like, dang it, I gotta get up there. Or like Tyler would take off to go work on a movie and he'd come back and I'd have a new belt. Stuff like that. So Tyler and I were always like, and I think if I had to do all of this all over again, I would find somebody to work with alongside, because my learning progressed at a much more rapid rate than if I was just going through it on my own.
Right.
Having somebody with me to struggle and be like, hey, I have this. But it was almost like people finding different parts of the same puzzle and be like, hey, look, I got this piece. Oh, I have this piece. They go together, that kind of thing.
Yes.
So this was, I immediately thought of you when I read this. In most cases, the same tactic for each maneuver must be drilled on the opposite side of the body for the proper balance and efficiency. But the chief consideration in developing form is to make sure that no fundamental mechanical principles are violated. And I distinctly remember you and I working, like we'd have a test in like a couple of weeks. So we'd start really drilling down on things. We're working on set work or working on specific techniques. And then you're like, okay, let's switch. We'll do it opposite. So if we're doing everything with the right hand, we'll switch over to the left hand. And I carry that with me to this day. I'll go through, I teach 1 day a week. I go to class at least twice a week. And then I have some private lessons that I do alongside all of that. And so when I see some student getting bored, then I'm like, okay, switch, do it in the opposite stance that you were just doing, and do the same drill again. And they're like, but I'm no good with my left hand. I'm right-handed. And I said, well, you have two hands, don't you? Yeah. Why would you want to only use one hand? Why would you limit yourself that way? Or 2 feet or whatever. And they're like, well, I don't ever use my left hand. I'm like, well, then go cut your hand off and come back. And they always look at me. I'm like, I have a knife in my pants pocket in my gym bag. Do you want me to get it? And there was one kid looked at me and dropped his jaw. I'm like, I'm joking. But there's no point in doing things with just the side that you're good with, when you have a perfectly working other arm that you can use, So, and you were kind of the proponent of that for me. It's like, let's switch. And for a multitude of factors, yes, you have two hands, use two hands. Absolutely. But also, it does something to your brain. Like you're using the other side of your brain, and I think it solidifies the strong side. Like it
does.
It can't just not help you. Like you should struggle, right? There's there's a concrete thing. There's a solidifying of learning something when you struggle, I think.
Yes.
And by forcing yourself to use your opposite hand that you're not good with, or your foot that you're not good with, there is you're improving your other tools. You're improving your strong side.
You're absolutely right. Our brains are cross-wired so that the right side so for a right-handed person, it's the left side of their brain that controls the right side, and the right side of their brain that controls the left side of their body. And so your body knows how to write your own name, or your mind knows how to write. If you're right-handed, your mind knows how to pick up a pen and write your name. However, your muscle memory is ingrained on the right side. The left hand, that's where the struggle comes from, because your mind knows how to write your name, but the left hand muscles don't.
They haven't worked it.
And so, if you, like when you're saying, hey, to that struggling student, hey, switch your stance. Now practice this on the other side. You can see their mind just totally, like, they're really working. They're like, okay, wait, like, how do I do this? And it's like massive overdrive stimulation learning on their mind to figure out, how do I do all of this with the other side?
Yeah.
That's I never thought about it in terms of, like, if you see a student that's working on something and they're bored, now I'll just have them switch and say, do the opposite. Like, it will unbore them.
It's funny. I've learned so much more by teaching than I did by being taught. Because I get asked questions I never thought of. I think of things in a new way. And kids really don't have a filter. Like, as adults, we'll spare each other's feelings. Kids, they don't have that ability yet, especially young guys and gals. They don't have that ability to be like, oh, I'm going to say this in a more constructive way that doesn't hurt your feelings. They just kind of are like, no, that's dumb,
They vomit it out.
They vomit it out. And I actually really appreciate that, because there's no second guessing. I know exactly what that kid is thinking or saying. There's no
they haven't played.
Well, you don't have to dissect anything. It's all right there. I'm bored. or your breath stinks, whatever the case may be, they just tell you, and you're like, okay, we can adjust to that. I can fix this, Whereas sometimes when you talk to another adult, they might say it in a more constructive way, but it leaves room for interpretation. So I may not be able to get right to the root of the problem. I have an easier time teaching kids, although it takes longer because their attention spans, than I have. Not necessarily easier. It's actually harder to teach kids sometimes, but I feel like I can fix problems easier with kids because they don't sugarcoat anything most of the time. They'll just tell you what it is. Then there's no question. This is the problem. Here's how we're going to fix it. Whereas with adults, sometimes they sugarcoat stuff, and I'm kind of shooting in the dark as to identify what the problem is to adjust the lesson. Whereas a kid, you're just like, oh yeah, here, we'll just swap. Do it with your left hand, that kind of thing.
That's interesting. I think that's important for us to, it's like as kids when they're younger, they're pure and they don't have the filter.
Well, they don't understand cultural norms.
You talked about that in another podcast.
Yeah.
Cultural norms.
Yeah.
And so, it goes back to like what you were talking about, that one drill we were a couple of podcasts ago where we were doing, the drill was for the other opponent, but it was to send a clear signal.
Yes.
Of what you're trying to send your training partner. Clear signal so they can get an idea of what you're doing. Well, that is the same principle. Whereas, like, if you're working with a kid versus an adult, how can we? Maybe that's something we need to work on in our training. Is like, hey, maybe starting to encourage our students, like, hey, send us a clear signal of what you're struggling with or what you need, because then we can make that tweak.
We can make that adjustment and have more accuracy in doing it. It's my wife and I have this little game we play where if somebody's talking, like I'm telling you how I feel, my wife will say, "Are you dancing?" And meaning as like, are you dancing around the problem or are you telling me what you're feeling? Right?
Yeah.
And so we'll come to each other with a problem and we'll be like, no dancing. This is what's going on. Like, I'm meaning, I don't want to hurt your feelings, but I'm going to tell you exactly, just as a child would. This is what's going on. This is how I feel. This is what I'm dealing with. Not dancing around the problem. And the rule is, if we say that, the other person cannot be offended. Because like, I'm giving you an unfiltered opinion or an unfiltered feeling. And I don't want to be like, I don't want it to backfire in my face. I'm not trying to hurt your feelings. I'm just telling you, this is what I'm dealing with. This is what's going on. So therefore, by saying no dancing, here's what's going on. I'm giving you an opportunity to think about that. Like, okay, you're not trying to hurt me. You're just saying this. This is the issue. So like,
that's pretty good.
For instance, like, if there's an event going on and one of us doesn't really want to go, no dancing. I just don't want to go because I have to work tomorrow or I have this going on. I really don't want to hang out with those people or whatever, whatever the case may be. And that helps us avoid fighting about stuff. Yeah. Because there's no question about what the intent is.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So,
because somebody could easily say, well, somebody could say, well, I don't want to go to that event because, the food just always sucks.
Or I don't feel good.
I don't feel good. It's like, and that's just like a BS, like topical excuse where it's like, realistically, you want to say no dancing. I just don't want to go.
Yeah. And it's great because the target is front and center. It's clear.
It's clear.
Like there's no shooting in the dark, so to speak, right? There's no like, oh, well, maybe they're just tired or maybe they're stressed or maybe, no, I know why now. I know exactly why. The food sucks. The people suck. The event sucks. Whatever that case may be, there's no question about it. That's not always easy because sometimes it's harsh, but it's cool. We don't always do that, but I read it somewhere and I came home with this brilliant idea. I'm like, okay, we're going to say no dancing anytime that there's a conflict here or anytime that we want to talk about something that could possibly hurt each other's feelings. Like I said, it doesn't always work, but it works for us sometimes. So it's cool. It's fun. Cool. And sometimes it turns a stressful situation into a laughing situation. Because we're like, it makes it, it takes all of the pressure off sometimes.
The mystery.
The mystery. There's no guessing. And it's like, that's what you're bothered about, and it's turned potential arguments or disagreements into just a laughing, lighthearted, fun conversation, which is really strange. I'm sure that like somebody from another perspective would look at us and be like, "Those guys are crazy."
Yeah,
but we've gone from being really tense to like just start laughing until you're almost crying, it's cool. It's a really good tool for that.
I like that. Yeah, obviously that's something that couldn't be used all the time.
No.
But between you and your wife, that's a great tool.
Sometimes it's backfired though. There have been like family events, like we're gonna get together for a holiday or whatever. And It's like, oh, no dancing? I don't want to go. No, you don't want to go to my family's thing. So it's a double-edged sword that it can work both ways. But I would say for the most part, it works out more often than it doesn't.
That's good. That's good.
But, taking that back to martial arts, you have to be able to communicate with a clear picture. Especially when you're one-on-one with a partner and you're working a certain drill. If you're not getting it, you're limiting your partner's ability to get it too. Right? Mm-hmm. So if you're not getting it, you need to slow down or speed up or whatever the case may be. You need to be able to communicate that with your partner. Your training partner, your work partner, your life partner, whomever. You have to be able to communicate that. And you've got to find a way to do that. Whether it's like, hang on, wait a second, this doesn't work for me, or no dancing, but you're going too fast for me. Mm-hmm. You're going too slow for me. You're going too hard, too whatever.
I think a lot of time we're, afraid of looking weak, as far as like, hey, let's slow it down. Hey, we're going too hard. It's not.
That's ego.
That's ego, yeah. And I've really found myself recently trying to communicate and saying, hey, let's slow it down. Hey, sorry, I went too fast. Like, hey, you did a little bit of too much contact there. Mm-hmm. Like in the past, like if somebody had too much contact with me in sparring, if it was really bad, then I might be like, ooh, that was pretty hard. Like, take it down a notch. But if it was like borderline, maybe too much contact, I might have just not said anything. Yeah. But now I'm like, okay, there was a little contact there, so just watch it. Yeah. Yeah. And so far, nobody's really gotten super offended,
Yeah. Well, and if you're worried about getting hurt or worried about catching up because you're not up to speed, you're not learning.
Right.
You're now worried about getting hurt. You're now worried about catching up.
Surviving
that section, that instant. And the whole purpose of walking in the door is to learn. So don't defeat the purpose by not communicating that.
Yeah. Some people, I mean, we've had several, they just show up to the dojo and they just want to hit.
Yeah.
They just want to hit. And I found out that I maybe enjoyed that a little bit 5 years ago, Now I don't. I'm still want to really really learn. Like I've been thinking about the last few days, like you were saying, like we're here to learn. Like I was like, I'm like, no, like now I want to take my martial arts skill to the next level. Mm-hmm. Like now being a black belt, I want to get like really good. Really purify my technique.
Well, and you can't do that if you're trying to not get knocked out. Right?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. No, it's you got to put the stone to the steel, so to speak. You're sharpening that tool, and it needs constant care.
What was that? What was that you were talking about earlier? Say that again with the
knives.
The knives.
Well, like you have steak knives that you use for everything, right? And how often do they get sharpened versus how often do they get used? They get used all the time. And you might sharpen them once a year. Whereas you have like the carving knife that you like carve the Thanksgiving turkey with, right? And that's like not a knife you use every day, but every time, at least in my situation, every time I use it, I run it on the honing steel or I sharpen it before I use it because it's a precise tool for a specific thing. And I want it to work as best as I can make it work. Right? So I think of like when you first start, you have the beat up steak knife that's used every single day. And you don't really care if the blade gets nicked. You just want it to cut. And it doesn't have to cut perfectly. It just needs to cut whatever you're using. And so your first, the first few years of martial arts, that's your tool, right? And it gets used every time, every day. and it's rough. It's not smooth. It's not precise. But as you get better, your tools become that carving knife, that nice knife that is taken care of with the utmost care and is sharpened every time you use it, and you inspect the blade and make sure that fine point is a very fine edge. And like,
yes,
that's where I want to be with everything, right? That's the ultimate goal. You want to be that fine instrument, that tool that you can use, that you know works, that just glides through the turkey or whatever. You know what I mean? With little effort. Have you ever had sushi?
Yes.
Like from like a real sushi place?
I think so.
So I used to go, I had a neighbor that was Japanese, and she was born and raised in Japan. She moved here, got married, and there was this Japanese restaurant here in town that she used to like to go to. It was the only sushi place she liked to go to, and it was over downtown by the old Safeway.
Okay.
And Sakura? It's closed now, and it broke my heart when it closed.
Oh no!
This old guy from Japan, and like he would. I like to go there. It was not cheap, but it was good, and I like to go there and just say, "Make me something. Like, just give me whatever you want." And some of that stuff was scary to eat for the first time. It was like, "Oh, I don't even know what this is," but it was all good. It was always good, and he literally had a knife for every type of fish. Like there was a certain tool for each project. And every time I loved to sit at the bar and watch him work, because he would literally he would prep the knife every single time before each project or each meal, each piece of food. It was like, okay. And he would make sure it was clean, make sure it was nice and sharp. And then I just like to watch him work. And it was like, that's how I want to do things. Like the prep is just as important as the final product. Right? You know, I don't know. And maybe I'm just imagining that. But like, I think that it seems to me that he was like, every time it was like, he'd run it on the stone real fast. And it was wiped down and like, okay, this will work. This will do the job. And that single-minded focus for each, like 100% effort on each project. Each plate of food got the same effort from the beginning to the end. And that's a cool mindset.
That is a cool mindset. I would actually personally love to use fine steak knives on everything I cut.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I want to. There's nothing more that I don't like. There's very few things I don't like more than a dull knife that you're using for cutting.
Yeah.
You want to have something that
works
cuts
and is sharp. But how often do those tools get taken care of?
Not as often
as they should.
Unless you're the sushi guy.
Yeah. So it was just a different way of thinking of things,
So the lesson is to keep our knives sharp.
Sharp.
Keep our skills sharp.
Keep our skills sharp. Keep
as sharp as we can.
Well, and they all should have the same effort put into it as the carving knife or the sushi chef's knife. Should all if you're going to put time into something, you should always put it in with the same effort, that 100% effort, right?
Well, that goes back to the quote I was saying from...
I feel like such a hypocrite talking that way.
No. I see what you're saying. No, like what we should do versus
what we do.
Yeah. Well, that goes back to the quote that Bruce Lee said. You should train at top speed at all times.
Effort.
That's 100% effort at all times.
Yeah.
So,
hey, well, I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you very much for listening. I think we're running out of gas here. A couple of quick things to remind you of. We missed last week. We try to post every week. If you have questions, comments, you think we're full of crap, email us at formlesspod@gmail.com. One of the other goals I'm working on is setting up some more avenues for communication, maybe a Twitter account or a Facebook profile or something like that, so you can reach out to us. I have an Instagram. It's at the Live Life Loud. You can reach out to me there. Tyler, you got any social media you want people to reach out to you at?
Not at this time. Not at this time. Maybe in the future.
Okay. So the Gmail account, you can email us there. Send us your questions, comments. If you want to be a guest on our podcast, reach out. If you want us to be a guest on yours, reach out there too as well. We'd be happy to talk to you anytime. Anything else you want to add?
That's it. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thank you for listening, and we'll catch you next week.